What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Eye on the U, the Miami Hurricanes show of the Miami Herald, brought to you by your good friends Andre Fernandez and Jordan McPherson, who is with me, as always, back to talk a little bit of the off-season Hurricane stuff, football, a little bit of baseball, and we'll have a special guest on the show this week, Mr. The Guru, Larry Blustein, who a good friend of ours for a long time. Haven't had him on one of our shows in a while. He's going to be on momentarily to talk a little bit about this team, which has been busy signing people through the transfer portal, fortifying that roster for the 2025 upcoming season. Let's dive right in. Jordan, let's talk a little bit about some of these new additions. 8 players in the span of about roughly 2 weeks, both on offense and defense. They bring in a couple of linebackers, wide receivers, a kicker even, safety, cornerback, a running back. Let's talk a little bit. Let's start with those linebackers, Jordan. We talked a little bit about that area of their defense and how much they needed to strengthen it. Mohamed Tour and Kamal Bonner, 2 additions that come in for this team. What do you kind of see from those guys potentially as an impactful couple of guys to add to that unit?
Yeah, so Mohamed Tour, he's coming in from Rutgers. He actually has some connection with defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman, so that's a plus there.
Definitely.
And then you have, and then with Kamal Bonner, he's a younger guy from NC State. I believe he was a redshirt freshman, so he has 3 years of eligibility left. And we've talked a couple times in the show when we were talking about additions they would try to make after the spring cycle. Linebacker was one that really jumped out to me just because there's a lot of unknown outside of Wesley Basaint on the Hurricanes roster. I mean, you have Jalen Alderman, you have Raul Popo-Aguirre, but they needed more depth. They needed to fortify that unit to make sure they had some extra bodies in there. Of the 2, I feel like Mohamed Tour is probably going to have the better chance in terms of cracking the starting lineup, but both these guys should be able to, at minimum, add some rotational help to this team this season.
Yeah, definitely should fortify that defense, which needs all the help it can get, especially behind that defensive front. Wide receivers, Jordan, we know this team, obviously we lost Xavier Restrepo and it was hit a little bit by the transfer portal, but they bring in a couple of guys that have some experience and some big game experience. They bring in Keelan Marion, former wide receiver for BYU, and also Tony Johnson, former Cincinnati Bearcat. What can you expect from those 2 going into the season?
Yeah, well, Marion, I'm going to start with him because in addition to receiver, he's also really good in the return game. He had 2 kickoff returns for a touchdown last year, in addition to overall in his career having over 1,000 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns across 4 seasons, split time both at UConn first, then BYU. So he'll add the return game element to UM, which really haven't had that dynamic guy that spot as over the last couple of years. So Marion adds some stuff there. And then Tony Johnson, he's got a bunch of experience. Let me actually pull up his exact numbers. He's the one guy who actually didn't grab my stuff on from him right before we started doing all this. Yeah, my bad on that. Just finished his redshirt junior year. Cincinnati, he had 12 catches for about 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. So again, we know what UM has, a lot of youth at the receiver spot, a lot of potential, but trying to figure out how much that potential is actually going to get maximized going into this year. Again, we have CJ Daniels transferred in, and then you look at all those young guys that we talked about, the freshman class, the Malachi Tonys and of the world and whatnot. But again, just the more bodies they have, the more guys with at least some semblance of experience, the better. Just because, again, it's a lot of replacing between Xavier Restrepo gone, Sam Brown gone, Isaiah Horton gone, Sam Brown gone. Just you lost so much from that receiver room. So to be able to add 2 bodies that have some experience is good for this room.
Yeah, and a lot of youth in that room too right now.
Yeah.
So too, a lot of inexperience, like you said, and so bringing 2 guys like this that have played not just in against good competition, but also in prolific offenses already to potentially make an impact for this squad. Switching there for the first time in a while, it won't be a Borregales kicking for Miami, but here's a known name, Bert Auburn, who we've seen kick for a couple years for the Texas Longhorns in some big games as well. I remember he had a hand in beating Alabama, and ironically enough, I'm sure they hated that a guy named Auburn was beating them at one time. But this is a guy again who, he's been to the playoffs. Has been a clutch kicker. We don't talk. Kickers don't get talked about a lot, but Borregales obviously was very important to this team. And here's Bert Auburn potentially coming in that crucial spot, which could decide games.
Yeah, and they needed him because, again, in addition to Borregales graduating, again, Borregales set the school record for career points and field goal percentage. But in addition to that, Abram Murray, who was supposed to be the replacement for Borregales, he transferred out. So they needed to get somebody in there and be able to get a guy like Auburn, 66 for 86 in his career. He went 24 for 39 from at least 40 yards out. Obviously, the Hurricanes are going to miss Borregales. He came up clutch so many different times over his 4 years. But to be able to get a veteran presence like Auburn in there at that position, that's going to be big, especially since, again, it's going to be interesting to see what this offense looks like. Again, when they had Cam Ward last year, the goal was touchdowns every drive. That's still the expectation this year. But, again, you need that safety blanket at kicker. Again, it's always just the crapshoot position at college football. I mean, the college kicker moniker lives and dies in so many big moments during a season. To be able to have someone who has the experience and knows what it's like to be in some of those pressure cooker situations, that's pretty big for you to be able to get that to replace a guy like Andre Borregales.
The goal is always touchdowns, Jordan, every time. The difference is when you have an offense like Miami had, which probably most of the time last year did get in that end zone, is rare. But yeah, they're definitely that's you have to have that because you're gonna. I mean, hopefully Miami doesn't want to see themselves in these shootout games like they did last season. They want their defense to be able to shut down some opponents a lot more often than it did last year, without a doubt. But you have to have that, and then for field position, it's huge. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it gets talked about in terms of field goals and extra points and whatnot. But the field position is tremendous, and we know how much how much Borregales made a difference in that department. Yeah. So having a guy with that experience will definitely be a plus. Let's turn to that much maligned secondary, which brings in two potentially impactful players here. You've got Jacoby Thomas coming in from Tennessee, again, from another program that made the playoff last year. So another guy with big game experience. And then you've got coming in at the cornerback position, Keontae Scott, who played at Houston. What do you kind of see from those two guys?
Yeah, so both these guys, again, big school guys. Jacoby Thomas, to start with him, last year has sacked, 3 tackles for loss, 2 defended passes. Safety, again, that's the interesting spot. You have Zechariah Poyser at one spot. That second starting safety is really still undetermined. So, I mean, you've got Markeith Williams, you've got Dylan Day, you've got Zaquan Patterson, you've got Isaiah Taylor, and you got the 2 freshmen, Amari Wallace and Bryce Fitzgerald. But Zaquan Patterson being hurt and not really doing much during spring really left the door open for that second spot opposite Poyser for basically be up for the taking. And needed to get some security there to make sure that they had someone with experience to have for that second spot because nobody really grabbed it during spring. So it's going to be interesting what he does. Again, prior to his time at Tennessee, he also played at Middle Tennessee State, had 4 interceptions there in 2022. So has some experience, knows what he's doing. And then as for Keontae Scott, he's primarily a corner. Looks like he's going to be mostly in that nickel spot, but he also has the experience where he can play safety, and that's where Corey Heatherman's approach, where he's going to try to get the best 4 or 5 guys for the secondary on the field at all times. So him having that flexibility, that versatility is going to come big there. But I would expect him mostly to be competing with Tamari Brown and Charles Brantley, one of the other guys who came in through the transfer portal out of Michigan State. I'd expect the 3 of them to be competing for that nickel spot. And then you also have the likes of O.J. Frederick and Xavier Lucas compete primarily being on the boundary after O.J. Frederick having that incredible freshman year and Xavier Lucas just being arguably the best guy during spring among the corners. So their secondary looks to be in a lot better place than it was last year. I mean, let's face it, it really couldn't get much worse than what we saw last year down the stretch. So the fact that it looks like they have a lot more, in addition to just what they have among the starters, it looks like their depth is going to be a lot better in terms of their 2 deep.
Yeah, and that's what you need. That's what you need if Miami's going to take that next step and truly for starters, get that conference title they want and get into the playoff and then potentially contend. I mean, those are two big steps that we saw teams last year that got there and then got pretty much. I mean, really, the ACC didn't do much at all. I mean, SMU got beat pretty handily by Penn State, and then Clemson had the quick exit as well. So it shows you that getting there is one thing, actually contending is another thing. But step by step with this program. Jordan, through this point right now, and seeing all these additions, and then as I ask you this, we're going to bring in our buddy Larry in here to give us his own perspective. I know he's been out there probably watching a lot of the high school kids during their spring football season the last week or so. How do you kind of see the team at this point, through the spring session and now adding these extra pieces? Kind of where are they as they, with a couple months to go before we get into the fall workouts?
Yeah, before I get to that, though, there's one other guy we didn't talk about, though, running back Shamar Brown.
Shamar Brown.
Yeah.
So I'm going to forget the Bison. Come on.
Yeah. So I was going to touch on him. Just finished his redshirt freshman season, was at FCS North Dakota State, won a national championship with them. And he was just phenomenal down there. Obviously FCS level, but 1,181 yards and 15 touchdowns on 240 some carries, just shy of 5 yards per carry. Was the Jerry Rice Award winner, which is given to the top freshman at the FCS level. And his main thing, obviously, he has the talent. We saw that, but he adds that pivotal fourth running back to the Hurricanes room, which, again, you had Mark Fletcher Jr., you had Jordan Lyle, and then Gerard Pringle was going to be the number 3, Chris Weekly Humphrey as well. So 5 competent, solid running backs now in that room. The more depth you have in there, the better. And the Hurricanes knew that 5 was the ideal number at minimum to have in terms of scholarship running backs. So now you have 3 guys who have multiple years of experience beyond Mark Fletcher as a junior, Jordan Lyle as a sophomore. And you have 3 guys who are true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, or going to a redshirt sophomore year to go behind them to just keep that depth and keep that train moving with that position group.
Yeah, and injuries are so easy to happen at that position too. So the more you have, the merrier, and the more. And here's another one that even though it's FCS, but we've seen North Dakota over the years be a contender and be one of the most prolific teams in college football. It's a team that really could play potentially at a D1 level and make some noise if they were at that level, beat some teams with some of the talent they get up there. So I think it'd be a good transition. And you've seen he could be one of these other guys that comes from an FCS team and makes an impact. It's very possible because a lot of times we've seen that, especially since the portal has picked up in recent years in college football. But but going back to now that we hit all those transfers, the question about just where this team is at, we're going to bring in Larry in a second, but where do you kind of see this right now, Jordan?
Yeah, no, I mean, the roster is definitely in a much better spot than it was even 2 weeks ago. I mean, shoring up that linebacker position specifically was the spot that I really thought they needed to get at least one guy. Getting 2 guys that both look like they could have some impact early is big. Just quickly position by position. I mean, running back room looks great. The offensive line is extremely talented. Same with the defensive line. They should be really good in the trenches, assuming they're able to stay healthy. And if the secondary looks as improved as it does on paper, this looks like a much better roster. Obviously, the quarterback spot is going to be the $1 million or $4 million, I guess, question about where things go from there with going from Cam Ward to Carson Beck. But the supporting cast around it looks significantly better than what it was when everything broke at the end of spring. And we got about 2 months until we start things up with fall camp, and then about 2.5 months from now, we got Notre Dame up here. So we've talked about how the schedule is, how much tougher it's going to be this year versus last year. But on paper, this looks like a really solid team. We just have to see how it all comes together.
All right, then, without further ado, let's bring in our buddy Larry Blustein. You've probably heard him on the radio. You've seen him around. If you're involved with high school football or football at any level for the last I'm not going to say 4 or 5 decades to make Larry feel old, but they've been.
You're not going to say it, but you're going to say it.
But I'm going to say it. I love Larry. He loves me. We've known each other forever. I could say something like that. And Larry, how you doing, man? Always good to see you. And that mausoleum to sports that you have behind you. So I can't even think of any trinket or memorabilia, anything you can think of. I'm sure Larry owns it, and it's probably on that wall back there.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys, for having me in. Busy time of year with spring football going on with the high schools. I just got back excuse me, last week, 6-day, 13 schools upstate to see some of the teams that, that have an opportunity to be pretty special. Got a chance to see Reigns, had an opportunity to see Venice and a couple of other programs that, could directly impact a lot of the schools down in South Florida, probably will. But, just keeping busy. Saturday, I went to Miami Northwestern. Teddy Bridgewater, I think, announced on Wednesday or Thursday they were just going to have a little scrimmage over at the school, and about 11,000 people showed up. I mean,
it's Northwestern for you. It always is.
But that's what I've been doing. Keeping going with that, and obviously had a chance to watch Miami, University of Miami during the spring. Ran into Jordan at the spring game, and and every Monday night we do a podcast, Six Ring Canes. So we got to kind of stay sharp, right. And it's as far as our knowledge on that. But it's funny that you bring up the mausoleum, because every Monday
museum, not mausoleum, but no, you know what I meant,
At the end of every show on Monday night on our podcast, we have a show and tell. And I break out stuff like from the 50s and the 60s. And I'm going to give you a sneak preview on what I'm bringing out. This is the Peach Bowl.
The Peach Bowl. The Peach Bowl. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's shaped like a peach, obviously.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys got the sneak preview of my show and tell.
Oh, is that from 1980?
Yeah, this was the 81 Peach Bowl.
Or 81, yeah.
The 80 season, you're right. 81
season, yeah.
What is neat is in every, it's shaped like a peach, and in every the media guy shaped like a peach, which is pretty neat. So
I'm telling you, man, it's just,
so you guys got a little sneak preview of what I'm going to unveil to them tonight. But and every week that's what I do. I bring out some Orange Bowl paraphernalia from way back. And it's a shame I don't do basketball, because I have a lot of a great early Rick Barry type basketball stuff. But it's been a great off season as far as from high schools, because you never really and I found out that I could go to softball now and girls flag football and have a good time and see a lot of people who are associated with regular football at a lot of those games. So it's been a pretty interesting off season as I was listening to you as Jordan said, the landscape of Miami's roster every year changes. And, I can remember back when Mario first got here, and I went in to talk to him. And the one thing that he says, every single year we're going to have changes. Every year we're going to have changes on the roster and in the coaching staff, because you never get it right. And I look at the from year to year, and you look back, his first roster, as opposed to just 2 years later, 72 different changes. And it just shows you, how you build, and especially in this day and age, because we are talking
revolving door. Yep.
Oh, it's crazy. And I was talking this morning with Alex Dono, and the very fact, because he says there's, University of Miami fans are really upset with the fact that they're not developing kids. They're bringing in portal kids. And I said, well, you know what? That's the way it is everywhere. Okay, so Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State may have, a few more, frontline kids that they've developed. But, you look at Miami, and I think a lot of I think they were referring to quarterback. And, I mean, listen, you're not going to shut the door on a generational quarterback like Cam Ward. Now, obviously. And I mean, right now, they and this is a question that when I had Mario on our show last week, I asked them, because and I think maybe I mentioned this to Jordan at the spring game. How can you be sold on a quarterback who's never taken a snap here? Yeah. And the last time he really was a relevant quarterback, he had Ladd McConkey and Bowers. on that roster, and he doesn't have anywhere near that now. And I thought it was so essential for a quarterback to be there. And he really hasn't. And that worries me that his first real, quote unquote, game where bullets will be flying will be on August 31st against Notre Dame, defending national runner up. So, those are the things that kind of like stick in my head. Yeah, he's great. And yeah, he's proven, and he beat Columbus when he was at Mandarin. And, he's had some really
feels like forever ago.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's all new faces on that receiving corps.
Right.
So the only thing that I think that saves anybody on this offense, that's new or a question mark, is perhaps the top 5 offensive line in the country, where Alex Mirabal and obviously Mario Cristobal, I think, have developed easily frontline talent. You got 2 first-round draft picks next year. Mauanoa is expected to go in the top 10, pick-wise. And then you have guys like Bell, who's really improved. And you have Samson Okunlola, and you have a revolving center, that's over the last couple of years with Lee, and, a new one now. So Brockmeyer. But, I just think that this team, especially, I think where it's going to really look a whole lot better is the secondary, because the secondary was the reason why Miami didn't get into the playoffs last year, because they couldn't stop us 3, so they, but what happened was you add pieces of guys who have played. I think we were looking today, they've added 78 games of experience in the secondary.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot. That's a lot. Where do you kind of who anyone in particular on that? I was going to ask you about the secondary, obviously the big weak spot last year. Anybody in the snippets that you've seen so far in the spring game, or maybe I'm sure you were at a couple practices before that. Anybody that sort of stood out to you that maybe could be like an impact player either on that side or any other part of the team?
Well, yeah, let's look at the secondary, and I'll tell you what, the things that stand out from a technical and athletic standpoint are Zachariah Poyser, who came from Jacksonville State, stud. Xavier Lucas, who we had an opportunity to watch down here with American Heritage and also Deerfield, stud. And then Charles Brantley, who, played at Venice, went to Michigan State. I think those 3 right there, along with a returning O.J. Frederick, gives you not just a good secondary, but one that could really make, and the very fact that, at times last year, not counting the opener against Florida or looking at Florida A&M or Ball State, but the front 7 was average. The linebacking core was awful. Wesley had nowhere near the year before that he had before. Mauanoa's brother didn't have anywhere near the year before. So you were with a front 7 that was less than adequate at times against some of the top competition. And then all of a sudden you had a secondary that, that couldn't cover anything. So that's why you're giving up 48 points. And that's why, while they had most likely the most prolific offense in school history, and definitely putting up point after point in yards and had some great performances, the defense really hurt. And I think that's where the focus was this year, or especially during the spring. And I'm sure Jordan will agree, when you add a defensive coordinator like they did, somebody who is an aggressive guy, somebody who knows and is a proven guy, coming from Minnesota and having been in the Big Ten. And obviously that's you have to game plan. You have to have the right talent, to play that. I think that's the area, guys, that I've looked at the most. I think that, if Wesley added 25 pounds, so, as a linebacker, I think that he and Aguirre should be the starting linebackers. But you also have Cam Pruitt, who I think showed a lot, and the Jalen Alderman kid. I think the defense is really going to be so much better. I think the person that came back that made such a difference, just because he has so much experience, is Akeem Messador. Here's a guy, if they want you to play inside, he plays outside. He'll even cover, which we don't want to see that again. But 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 then you have obviously Ahmad Moten, who's like in the middle and does a tremendous job because of his size. Justin Scott, obviously Ruben Bain, who's going to be another one of those guys next year. It's going to be a first-round draft pick for Miami, and all of a sudden your defense doesn't look so bad. So I think that's the focus for me this spring that I was looking at. I was looking at frontline talent on defense in the depth, and that secondary, especially what you guys alluded to. They've added even more pieces, to the secondary, over the last couple of months. So, you got guys like Ethan O'Connor, and you got the Jacoby Thomas, and so I think that this is a defense that's going to really, really. It's gonna catch a lot of attention.
Yeah, Larry, you mentioned we've talked a lot about the transfers. We talked a good bit about some guys who are here already. Some of the true freshmen who, from this last recruiting class, I mean, there's some talent there. I mean, Hayden Lowe, he popped out to me right from the beginning in camp. A couple of the receivers, Josh Moore and Malachi Tony, who we both got to see down here, and then Donta Simpson from Chaminade. Those were some of the guys who caught my eye. Anybody from those four, or anybody else from this true freshman class who was basically all here for spring, catch your eye, who you think might be able to pop onto the scene right from the get-go?
Well, obviously the elephant in the room that could take over a game in Malachi Tony. So, I mean, this is a guy I don't care. I was having this conversation. I don't care if he's supposed to be in his junior year and he's eating Happy Meals. This kid is a difference maker, and this is going to put a lot of pressure on Ray, because I think this is Ray's last go around if he doesn't, really get it, because of the fact that Malachi can do so much, and so could Ray, and we saw it. We saw it for 4 years in high school, but the very fact is right now, Miami needs playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, especially with the departure of five weapons, and in a running back that a lot of people didn't give much, credence to until the end. And Martinez, who I think is going to be a major, major pick for Seattle. So you're going to have to develop your wide receivers. You're going to have to and that's why I thought that the relationship between Beck and everybody that he has to utilize in his arsenal was going to be important this spring, just like it was for Ward last year. And if you remember last year in the spring game, Ward threw for 440 yards and 4 touchdowns, and a lot of people got a chance to see that. They didn't get a chance to see that this year. So. And I can understand where the Hurricane fans are, a little skeptical about it, because I am too. Because I saw Carson Beck play, but not in a Miami uniform and not with this cast of characters. So who's going to stand out on that offense? What weapon is going to, stand out? I mean, I think that Lyles is the guy that needs to. I think he has the home run power, where Mark Fletcher is going to get those yards. He's just not going to get 70 of them. But Lyles can. We saw and you look at a kid like Gerard Pringle, and obviously you guys were talking about the young man that they brought in from North Dakota State, but somebody like Lyles has to step up his game, and you lose a tight end like Arroyo, who was very valuable, which is going to put, I think, the best player on that team in the spotlight, in Elijah Lofton. I think Elijah Lofton can play 5 different positions for that team, but he's going to need to really be the guy this year, because he can move around, guys. He can move around everywhere. So he becomes a crazy mismatch, for anybody, because he could play running back too, as you saw. So if he has that type of speed and that type of elusiveness, and you line him up as an H-back, or you line him up as a tight end, there's no safety in the world that's going to be able to keep up with him. So he's a guy that really has to kind of loosen things up for some of those playmakers. And, we were having this conversation today about playmakers. If you remember when Jeremiah Smith was the number 1 wide receiver in the state from Chaminade, the second one is sitting right there at the University of Miami in JoJo Trader. So I think he has that athletic ability to kind of take over as well, but they haven't done it yet. and that whenever there's a question mark, and you're not opening up with Bethune or Ball State, you're opening up with a pretty good football team. So whatever's going to happen is going to have to happen early on.
I'm still seeing Elijah Lofton scoring on Chaminade for Bishop Gorman.
I
think he just got another touchdown, and there was like 7 of them he had in that game that day. Remember that?
And he was only a sophomore at the time.
He was only a sophomore. No, he's a monster. But Larry, before you go, one last thing I wanted to ask you. Since you've seen a lot of spring football on the high school level, any commit or target that maybe jumped out at you now so far in the spring that you can't wait to see come September or August, actually?
You mean that
on the high school level? Yeah, that's someone Miami's looking at right now.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I love Calvin Russell. And we'll see what happens with him as far as his decision. I think that he has an opportunity to do some good things. Jordan Campbell. How he got to Northwestern. I don't know.
Well,
I'll tell you
topic for another time.
Well, I pity anybody that's on Northwestern's roster. Schedule. Anybody. Venice too. What I saw the other day, when you have as much talent as that team does, and obviously you got a guy like Jordan Campbell who I think has an opportunity to do some really good things, when he gets to Miami. Javen Mallory, you talk about running backs. Here's a kid out of West Boca who's committed to Miami. Here's a guy that a lot of people are going to be looking at this coming year as well. Because he's one of those plug and plays. They haven't closed the book on our boy Jason Lopez at Chaminade Madonna. He's got an opportunity, to do that. Let's take away that he looks like, a science student, but the kid could,
we've said it a bunch of times. You said it a bunch of times to me on the sidelines. He's a little bit of like a Restrepo 2.0 type.
Yeah, with more athleticism. Because you saw that night, he could drop 30 in any game in basketball too, which is which is good. But those type of guys, maybe I know they're in a kind of a dogfight right now for Ryan Moret, the big lineman, the wrestler from Miami Southridge, who
solid.
Is 6'4", 285. I have a bet with his dad that he's never going to make weight next year for wrestling because he wants him to stay there the whole year instead of going to college. But Nebraska made a really big impression on him, obviously, because they've always been weight room intensive and stuff. And I think that they probably shot a pipe dream like Oklahoma did that Davin Joseph that year about wrestling. There's just no way. He'll be too big. So, those are the guys I think that Miami has a really good shot at. I think everybody got in a little bit late on the kid Cameron Wilson from Miami Southridge, who was blown up to a top 10 type of kid. Say he committed to Syracuse. That would have been a guy, but you know what? It's not over yet. And I think what Jordan mentioned, with some of the kids that are freshmen that came in early, you still have a group of kids that are going to be coming in late now, into this, that are coming in this week and next week, that couldn't get, because they went to private schools or they didn't graduate early. So you got a couple of those kids that I think they can make up ground pretty quick too. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Miami's done a tremendous job of recruiting, and they've done a tremendous job of national recruiting, which is good as well. But you know how the fans are down here. If you don't get everybody in South Florida, you're going to hear about it.
Definitely. Well, Larry, thanks as always. Fountain of knowledge as usual. We appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we'll see you. Hopefully, I'll see you pretty soon before the spring session ends on the sideline somewhere.
We will. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Larry. We'll see you soon.
Okay, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Larry Blustein, everybody. Always, like I said, a fountain of knowledge, but also really good dude, and we appreciate him being here and giving us some of the perspective on this University of Miami football team as they continue to progress toward the 2025 season. But now we're going to wrap the show up talking a little baseball, Jordan, because we've talked a little bit in recent episodes here about this Canes baseball team, but I don't think we've talked so much since they got on this hot streak. And because at the time we were like, they were sort of hovering around 500. We didn't know what to make of them. Can they make a little bit of a run? And now all of a sudden they have, although right as we're doing this,
of course,
little bit of a snag. They get swept at Virginia. Is it a blip? And is this more the team that had won several series in a row and put themselves in position to not only get back into the regionals again, but maybe even have a chance at hosting it? I mean, the ACC tournament is coming up, I believe, in
about
2 weeks.
Yeah.
They've got, speaking of Notre Dame in baseball, they've got Notre Dame to wrap up the regular season coming up. But Miami 30-21 overall, not bad. Probably needs to pad that a little bit more to make sure they can not only get in, but maybe even, like I said, have a shot at potentially hosting a regional. Hasn't done that in a few years. But they enter the week 8th in the conference. And Jordan, before you say anything, about freaking time, a format in this ACC tournament that is simple and easy to understand and easy to get through, instead of all these permutations and losing one game and you're pretty much screwed.
Yeah,
and,
the 3-team pod BS.
And
let's just call it what it is. Yes.
Yeah, and then meaningless third games and things like that. Okay, I know it's do or die, single elimination, but you know what? Better that way.
Yes, no doubt about it. But yeah, with that Virginia series, I mean, they got rocked game 1. They lost 6-1. The other 2 games were close. They got walked off in game 2. They had a rare their bullpen had a rare collapse, which is something that we haven't seen over the last few weeks since they moved Brian Walters from the rotation to the closer role. And then Sunday they lost 8-6. So 2 of the 3 games were competitive. But remember, before that, they won 5 consecutive conference series, including, I believe it was 3 of them were sweeps. Granted, the NC State series only played 2 games because the third game got rained out. South Florida weather in late April to where we are now. That's inevitable this time of year. But this team is looking like it's in a very good spot in terms of making the NCAA tournament. Their RPI is up to number 29 right now. They were, I think, before the Georgia Tech series, they were somewhere in like they were somewhere in the 50s, low 50s to high 60s. So the fact that they got themselves into the 20s is really good.
Yeah.
I feel like
yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think they probably need to take at least 2 of 3 against Notre Dame, or make a decent run in the ACC tournament to lock it in. But they should be in a good spot going into the conference tournament about liking their chances. I don't think they're going to be able to host losing those 3 games to Virginia. I feel like knock them out of that contention, especially since a couple other teams, including that other in-state team up north that took 2 of 3 against number 1 Texas this weekend, probably took them out of a chance of one of those bubble bids, if you would say. Yeah. But
the two teams up north are probably going to end up hosting, and that's going to hurt them a little bit. But I mean, it's not at this point. I think it would take a major run. Like they'd have to pretty much go on a tear and like maybe sweep Notre Dame. Maybe I don't know. At least maybe make the semis or the finals of the ACC tournament, something like that, to really even have a chance at it. But I think they've done enough where, barring the opposite happening, barring a major collapse where they lose they go 0-3 against the Irish.
They go 0-3 in the first round.
1 and done. Yeah, like avoiding something like that. I think they've played themselves in at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, a lot of these things with the tournaments and whatnot, it's what have you done for me lately? So having those 5 conference wins, obviously losing the Virginia one. If they win Notre Dame, they won 6 of their final 7 ACC series. Right. That's huge. And to be able to do that and then squeak in at least one win in the ACC tournament, ideally probably 2 to get into the semifinals, depending on where they finish in the seeding, because it's really clustered together right now. Like they're entering this final week 8th in the conference, and they could potentially finish anywhere from, I think, 3 to 12, depending on how everything happens in this final weekend. And with that new format, praise be, it's 16 teams, single elimination. The top 4 teams get a double bye. Seeds 5 through 8 get a first round bye. 9 through 16 play in that first round. So, and then it's just, if you win, you move on. If you lose, you're out. And it's just simple, clean, efficient formatting. I'm a big fan of it. It's about time they made this change. And just to touch on a couple individual players that I feel like need to highlight, Daniel Cuvée had the slow starts to the season, but we knew if he rounded into form, he would be a difference maker. He is rounded into form. He's up to 15 home runs, an ACC leading 70 RBI. His OPS is over 1,100. He has been that clutch guy they've needed in the heart of their lineup. and he just complements so many other guys. I mean, Jake Ogden as their steady guy in the leadoff spot. Having Cuvée back there is big for him as well. Again, you have the insurance and the protection behind him. You can always use protection, as we've heard that saying going in the lineup before. Griffin Hughes, since moving up to the Friday night spot because Nick Robert getting hurt, he's out for the year. For him, Griffin, to step up from the Saturday guy to the number one guy in the rotation, he's done that with relative ease. He has a 3.9 ERA, 78 strikeouts over 71 innings, a 235 batting average against. They need him to continue doing that. Obviously, they need him to step up well in game one against Notre Dame and when they start the ACC tournament. And I touched on Brian Walters. He started the season as their Sunday guy in the rotation. They moved him into the bullpen a few weeks ago. 10 relief appearances, 8 saves. That's clutch. To be able to not just make the adjustment, but to excel as soon as they put him into that spot. And their bullpen was a lot of mystery going into the season. They had guys who they trusted the arms. They felt like they had talented arms, but they didn't have experience. Right. Brian Walters, to be able to handle that move, has done wonders for them to close things out in a lot of these ACC games that they've won over this last month and a half. And for him to be able to come into that role, it's steadying them out. And they need that in the back end.
Yeah, they need that. And that always, when you get closer and closer to Omaha, whether you get, the regional round and as you move on super regionals and whatnot, you always see it. You always see those guys that can just, because nobody's going to go super deep into games as far as starters go. Yeah, you need that. And that's a big, and in the past, that's always was a big component of the most successful UM baseball teams over the years. The ones that made it to Omaha, the ones that won national titles, always had that big closer that could shut things down at the end. So that's good to see. Let's see if Miami can sustain it. Like you said, if one last series coming up at the Light against Notre Dame, and then it's off to the ACC tournament and that format, which looks more like a basketball ACC tournament, much easier to follow, which will be fun to watch. I think the urgency there too with the do or die format, even though some teams need it more than others, some will there'll be a little more urgency, but I think that is better than that round robin 3-pod format that was it really created a lot of meaningless baseball.
Yes,
that teams that were trying to focus on the playoffs then kind of how it is. They don't want to really go all out and want to get players hurt. At least now you're playing for something, and every time you step on the field in that tournament. So
correct.
All right. So for Jordan, I'm Andre Fernandez. Thank you for watching Eye on the U. Remember, you can catch us on YouTube and at MiamiHerald.com. We'll be back soon to continue to discuss UM football as it goes through the offseason and any other movements through the transfer portal and the aforementioned baseball team. And we'll talk maybe a little basketball in the future if there's anything to talk about with that team as they also continue to rebuild that roster through the portal and otherwise. Until then, we'll see you guys and take care, everybody.